Hi, this is Luciana Paulise, and today I'm interviewing Laura Sapp. Um, Please welcome to our interview. We'd like to know more about talent, as you are the VP of Talent. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Well, wonderful. Well, it's a very interesting topic nowadays when we're working in a remote. So many employees that we don't see, new hires that we never saw before. We don't know when we will be able to see them. So,
Mhm.
how do you manage talent in this
Yeah,
context?
good question. I mean, it has been a crazy 2020, and I can't even believe we're at March 2021 already. And hopefully, we're going to start to see an end to this pandemic as these vaccines roll out. So I'm excited about that. But let me just take a quick step back and maybe tell you a little bit about IAC, and I can frame kind of IAC, our talent strategy, and kind of how we look at talent, and then maybe how we look at talent during the pandemic, and just give you an overall explanation. It's funny, I've never done an interview like this over video. I've sometimes done it over the phone, but 2021, all things are different. So IAC is not your typical tech company. We, over the past 25 years, we're a corporate portfolio business, and we own and operate a large variety of consumer tech businesses, kind of businesses that are in customers' day-to-day lives, like a Vimeo or a Care.com or Angie Home Services. So we really kind of spanned the gamut there of really helping customers make transactions or decisions in their lives a little bit easier. So over the course of the last 10 years, I think actually 25 years, we've spun off 10 public companies, and we're about to spin off another one here down the line, Vimeo. And as part of my role, I kind of sit over all of those different businesses and help kind of dive into each business at different parts of their life cycle, when hiring demand ticks up, or there's searches that kind of need a little bit of extra help or touch. I kind of work very closely with the hiring managers, CEOs, CFOs to kind of go out and attract the best talent to the portfolio of businesses. So, in the past year with COVID, knock on wood, a lot of our businesses kind of honestly flourished during this time. So we really saw a spike in hiring, around some of our businesses. Obviously, Care.com was the latest that we added to our portfolio earlier last year, right kind of before the world shut down, and worked really closely with their HR team to kind of help bring in new talent to the organization as they kind of made a transition from moving their headquarters and just kind of reassessing the business and bringing new talent in. But everything shifted last year, from the interview process to how do you attract talent to, historically, I would say earlier last year before the shutdown, we were in a different phrase where companies kind of, had their choice of, not choice of folks to kind of go after, but we saw this shift to where it's a candidate-driven market now, especially in some of the tech world, in some of the, in tech hiring, and, from product to BI engineers to marketeers, everything across the world, across the last year, I personally thought we saw a shift to really kind of like having to turn over stones and look for candidates in a wide variety of different places. Candidates, really started asking questions like, how is the company doing during this pandemic? What is the financial stability? And just interesting questions that, certainly you want to discuss during the candidate flow and conversation. But some of those conversations kind of got put to the front in those initial conversations that I was having with candidates versus maybe, closer to the end of the selling portion of a traditional interview. So might have gotten a little bit off topic for you, sorry.
No, that's fine. So you've seen a lot of shift Like right now, companies are more worried about the employee experience,
Yeah.
and that's part of that, right?
Yep.
Because
Yep.
it's
Yep.
not easy to find a good candidate, and you have to make them stay, otherwise they will go somewhere else. And especially now with all the perks that you can offer being remotely, I mean, not all the companies are working fine in a
Yeah.
remote mode. I mean,
Yeah.
we're mostly all are working, but that
Yeah.
doesn't mean they are really making their employees thrive
Yeah.
and be competitive with that,
Yeah.
right?
Even, you know, in the interview process, I think, you know, IAC and our businesses were definitely adaptive to video early on. And, you know, I'm talking 10 years ago. But I do think in the HR, you know, recruitment process, I formerly worked at Match Group, which was in the IAC portfolio of businesses. And, you know, we heavily adopted video interviewing early on in the process. And I remember 10 years ago, candidates being like video interviewing, I'm supposed to log on here. How does that work? And, you know, folks sitting at their desk and developers sitting at their desk, you know, in an office wouldn't be able to just hop on to a video call. And now it's kind of, you know, in the last 16, 15 months, it's like, to me, a no brainer. But at the same time, the Zoom fatigue is real, right? Like folks might not have time during the day, you know, especially, you know, working parents and folks that are juggling 15,000 things at home, they might not be able to kind of carve out that time. And so I find myself kind of adapting my schedule to, you know, maybe it's a phone call for the initial conversation, but that quickly, you know, translates to a Zoom if there's, you know, interest in kind of a connection there on the role. So really just trying to pivot to the candidate kind of, you know, flavor and being adaptable and being flexible in that candidate journey in the recruiting process is just incredibly important, I think.
Right. And what are the predictions for the hiring landscape in 2021? How do you see that?
That is a great question. You know, I think flexibility for every, you know, arena is key. And certainly, you know, at IAC, we've definitely been flexible over the past year. And I think when you say flexible like that, it's easy to be like, oh yes, we're flexible, but like, what does that really mean? It means, you know, maybe changing your team's working hours or saying to your manager, hey, I need to be online with my kids from, you know, 8 to 11, and I'm like unavailable, but I'm going to switch and pivot my hours from 11 to what have you. And I've seen that, you know, over and within, you know, teams and our portfolio businesses. You have to just be flexible. I mean, everyone, I think right now, whether you have kids, you know, single parents, people who are single, you know, everyone's just doing the best that they can, and overly kind of communicating what works best for you and your team is just so critical. And I think, you know, when folks just are you know, kind of hitting those limits and they're feeling strung out, you know, on both ends of the day, it's like time to just take a pause and kind of really, you know, talk to your manager and really kind of understand, you know, where you can kind of really carve out time in your day to really make the best use of your time and you know, work on the most impactful projects. I'm kind of jumping around there too, but so your original question was about hiring for, you know, this year. You know, I think when I'm talking to candidates, they have, like I said, a lot of questions around flexibility, what return to work looks like. Is it a, you know, 5-day a week in the office job? Is it, you know, is there any flexibility there? Is it, you know, purely remote? We have companies like Care.com who are completely remote equal, and they actually were remote equal right prior to the shutdown last year. We had just bought them and kind of transitioned them into that unique work style. And, you know, what a year to go to remote equal during 2020 when the rest of the world did, but they will continue to be remote equal post-COVID. And that's really attractive to some folks. Other folks, you know, I think
What do you mean with a remote equal? Exactly.
So yeah, so remote equal means being able to, we have a headquarters down in Austin, Texas, or we will have one when the world opens up. And by we, I mean CARE. It means putting your team on the same level playing field. So if 5 of your team are sitting in a conference room and you've got 2 people, who are on Zoom, everyone in this example would be on Zoom if you're sitting in a conference room or if you're in, San Francisco.
Right.
So you're all kind of looking at the same screen. So you don't have 2 people shoved off to the side who can't hear, what so-and-so is saying or look at the presentation. So really treating everyone as if they were in the same room using technology.
So that means that companies are offering the possibility that you choose if you want to stay or in the company or if you want to work remotely. It's basically up to the employee.
In CARE, they've made that decision to say, this is how we're going to operate. We're going to do remote equal first. And so yes, at CARE, absolutely. In some of our other businesses, I think in general, folks, will always find the power of being in a hub or being in a headquarters or just having that, Rebecca and I were just talking about how we haven't seen each other in a year and we used to work on the same floor together.
Right.
And how, you just kind of miss those like drive-bys or those conversations or, hey, you want to go get lunch? Like you miss that. And there's a power to like a sense of community that comes together when you can, see your teammates day to day. And I personally think there's always going to be a need for that in-person connection, however you bring it into your own, your own company.
Right. Companies have to think about that, because if some employees are not planning to go to the office very often, you still have to plan on alternatives on how to create that serendipity, right? That meeting.
That chemistry. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It's and listen, this is unprecedented times that we're all kind of navigating through. And I'm sure, hopefully, like, again, as the world starts to open up, we're going to start to see more and more of these conversations and kind of what works, what doesn't, and we might not all get it right, but we're all going to try to, work in the best way that we know how. So.
Right. How do you see training and development in this context? Because we've seen that there was a trend that millennials and the younger generations were looking for more training, but we're also seeing that with the COVID, training has been set aside, it's not the priority right now. We're trying to work.
Yeah.
So how do you see that happening? Are there any changes in how it's done? There will be changes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just even another reason why I personally think that in-person, relationships of being in an office, whether it's 1 day or 5 days a week, is so important. I mean, I think back to when I started my career and, you absorb so much by just being around folks, whether it's at, a lunch or, a dinner or a meeting with, folks that might be out of, you don't get to interact with them every day and kind of understand and listen and, be able to say how they might present. And there's just so much that is lost by not being in person. And a lot of training, it comes from being thrown into situations that you might not ever been thrown into before. Not your formal learning and development and training guides, a lot of that, there are some great programs that are online that, I can sit here and do, our annual certification and all that kind of stuff. But I especially think to the younger generation, the new grads, the fresh grads coming out looking for jobs or, being employed 1 or 2 years now, they've missed out on so much. And I really hope that, we'll be able to get back to that where that not intangible, what's the word that I want? Just the ability to kind of be in person will help pick up where they've missed out. I think with your traditional training, like I said, guides, like that can still happen online. I know developers and folks that are learning about new technologies, that happens, online anyway, it's probably a lot easier to ask the person next to you, hey, what did they mean when they said A, B, and C, you know, versus having to Slack someone or, you know, carve out a time to be able to say, you know, hey, can you talk at 3:20 because I didn't understand this. Like right now, life is so scheduled, at least I feel like. And I've tried to, in my time during the last year, just pick up the phone and reach out and call, you know, hey, do you have 2 seconds? I want to chat about blah, blah, blah. And just, you know, not be so formulated in the way that my calendar, you know, carves out my time, because that's kind of trying to mimic the in-office experience. You know, I don't have to schedule time to go and, you know, have a water cooler, you know, grab a coffee with someone. I can just say, hey, and it's, I find it a little bit more, you know, comforting when those inorganic conversations kind of happen. And, you know, it's just refreshing, I think, that way. Did that answer your question?
Yes, sure. And any recommendations for the employees on how to grow in their career when, you know, when they are far away, they're working remotely, not seeing their bosses. So is there anything they can do?
Yeah. I mean, I think you know, say yes to every conversation, say yes to, you know, things that might put you outside of your comfort zone. I think especially for introverts and folks that doesn't come as natural to kind of, you know, put themselves out there or make the first move, so to speak, you know, in a business setting, it's tough and it's hard, especially when, you know, you have to make those connections with someone you might not have ever met. I always, you know, what's the worst case scenario? So the person turns you down and says, no, I don't have time. Okay, great. Well, at least you tried. But I think trying to, you know, reach out, find someone in your, especially earlier in your career, find somebody who is, you know, a company and leadership that are going to invest in you, you know, whether that be for, you know, a training and development program or giving you time to just ask questions. I think one of the things that, you know, IAC does so well is we really love to give people a shot at their first, you know, C-level, VP, you know, CEO, CFO kind of title. And we're infamously known for not infamously, we're known for throwing people in the deep end and, you know, helping them, throwing them a life preserver if they're going to sink, but at the same time, allowing people to make mistakes, allowing people to kind of learn by, you know, process of figuring things out. And to me, it has been an invaluable kind of way to you know, pivot my own career into what I kind of am doing now from where I started, but B, you know, just being able to have that ability to just ask a lot of questions and be incredibly curious and, you know, just be able to not be afraid to make a mistake. I've made plenty of mistakes. And so, you know, and, you know, some big, some little, what have you, but, you know, every mistake I've made, I've learned from, and hopefully I don't make the same mistake twice. You know, just being willing to put yourself in situations that are going to make you grow.
Right, that's probably part of the culture of the company to see if the company allows that to happen, right? Maybe you want to do that, but then you feel like, I'm gonna screw up because my boss, you know, doesn't do this type of things. So is there anything you recommend for companies to include this behavior in their culture?
I mean, I think that's a good question. I think listening and really, you know, in my day-to-day world, I'm constantly talking to people and, you know, getting on now Zooms, phone calls, in-person lunches, what have you. And listening is key. I mean, a lot of people find it very easy to kind of get out there and talk about themselves and what have you. But, you know, being able to kind of sit back, listen, and ask questions to, you know, get to know either trying to help someone solve a problem, or help someone get to the crux of an issue. So I think, especially when you're looking at, you know, your internal culture, allowing folks to be a listener and also be able to kind of, you know, allow people to make mistakes and not be banished for it, or kind of, you know, the black sheep, now that you're not able to ever, you know, be able to work on the same project again. I just think that culture of like allowing a soft place to land is and in a business setting, obviously, and you know, sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes the stakes are on the line and things happen, but it's from those kind of experiences that, you know, I think people really grow. And you know, I always tell folks who ask me for career advice, like, what should I look for in my company, or what should I, if I'm making a career move, how do I know if it's the right move? And, you know, someone way back in the day always gave me a good piece of advice to say, you know, look at the leadership team, look at the people, and look at the person that you're going to be working for. Outside of that, look at the product. And if you can get behind the people and the product, you know, and you feel 90% great about that decision you're going to make to join that company, that's enough for me to say, jump in with 2 feet. You know, you don't have to, you know, everyone feels a little bit of anxiety when they're trying to like pivot in there or change jobs, especially now in this unique environment that we find ourselves in. But people in the product and, you know, kind of has never done me wrong. So that's the advice that I would give.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, thank you, Laura. I don't know if there's anything else that you'd like to mention, any other advice or anything that you see that we should be prepared for during this year.
No, I mean, I think flexibility, and, you know, candidates are asking a lot of questions right now, as they should. And, you know, I always try to frame any of my interviews with candidates, this is as much of an interview for them as it is for me. And, you know, this, you know, trying to figure out what they're looking for, and if what we have can kind of match their career goals, great. That doesn't always happen. But, you know, I think it's all about, you know, relationships, timing, and kind of, you know, helping folks find a spot that's going to let them shine. So.
Right. Any recipe for success for hiring in a remote setting?
Be flexible. You know, it's funny because yesterday I was interviewing somebody and they were on a Zoom, and all of a sudden, you know, I saw these 2 little hands coming up, like, to give somebody a hug from behind, and I was like, what's going on? And then I realized it was her son. And, you know, it was this little toddler, and I was like, it completely derailed the conversation but it was such a human moment that you couldn't help but kind of, you know, you kind of saw her face, and she's interviewing for, you know, big job. And she's like, I'm so sorry. I'm like, what's his name? Tell me about it. And you could see she instantly relaxed, and that just helped the conversation flow. And so, you know, I think what she thought was a terrifying moment was like a lovely little, you know, moment where we got to kind of bond and you know, take the stress off the conversation. And it was a great end to a conversation, and she's going to the next round, so I'm happy for her. So
wonderful. Yeah, so I think that one of what I can take from this interview mostly is that we have to blend, you know, our lives, professional lives, with our personal lives, and that's why it's gonna be we're gonna be able to be flexible. We're gonna be able to listen if we are more human.
Yeah, exactly. I like it.
More human at workplace. Thank you very much, Laura. It's been a pleasure. Again, Luciana Paulise today with Laura Sapp. Thank you very much for having us.
Thanks for the time. Thanks so much. Bye.